The Bel Air Hotel in Los Angeles held exactly 247 guests on the evening of October 14, 1977. The temperature outside was 71 degrees. The light in the main ballroom came from 3 overhead panels that cast no shadow, and the floor was polished to the point that a man's reflection could be mistaken for a separate man standing below. Chuck Norris sat at a table, reserved for spectators, 5th row back, wearing a navy windbreaker with the zipper halfway down, and a cap pulled low. To his left was a tournament director. To his right sat empty space. He was not dressed for the exhibition. He was dressed for being elsewhere. The exhibition that evening was meant to showcase the martial arts renaissance in Hollywood. The year was 1977, and there was money in the martial arts, television money, film money, and the studios wanted to know what they were buying. They had flown in one of their own to make the argument in person. Brad Lancaster was 31 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, 198 pounds, and he had spent the previous 4 years studying martial arts with genuine intensity. He had trained under a reputable instructor in the Valley. He had competed in 3 sanctioned tournaments, and won 2 of them. He moved with precision. He carried himself with the certainty of a man who had tested himself against resistance and prevailed. His black belt was legitimate. His reputation in the stunt community was solid. He had come to the Bel Air to demonstrate that the old guard, the old lineages, the old disciplines, the old men who had made their names before there were cameras, had been superseded. There was a new martial arts now. It was in the films. It was young. It was his. In the next 16 seconds, Brad Lancaster would say something from the microphone that would alter the trajectory of his own life. He did not know this. His instructor did not know this. The 247 people in the Bel Air did not know this. Only the man in the 5th row, cap pulled low, understood that a mistake was about to be made. Nobody in that ballroom understood they were about to witness a historical sentence. Brad moved through his forms first. 8 minutes of technique. His kicks were high and precise. His hand speed was good. His balance did not waver. The audience responded with the sound applause makes when people are being shown something they do not fully understand but can appreciate as effort. 3 of the kicks landed on a wooden target and cracked the wood in a satisfying way that photography would later reveal as real. He was not a fraud at technique. This was understood by everyone in the room. His flaw was not incompetence. It was something simpler and more dangerous. His flaw was the absolute certainty that what he had learned was all there was to learn. The microphone sat on the edge of the stage. Brad walked to it as though he had earned the right. He held it without checking if it was on. When he spoke, the voice moved through 247 people and hit the back wall and returned. 10 years ago, you needed a lineage. You needed to train in some temple or dojo for decades. You needed a master to sign off on your belt. That's finished, he said. His voice was measured. He was not angry. This was not a provocation. This was a man stating fact. The real martial arts exists now. On film sets, on television, in the studios. We've taken it beyond the old ceremonies and the old men who guard them. The lineages are history. The old ways don't translate. I've studied enough of them to know. I've competed enough to prove it. The era of the unknown master in the quiet dojo is over. We've moved past it. He paused. His hand hung at his side. He had not looked at the 5th row. He did not know the 5th row existed. Chuck Norris is a precision athlete in his own right, he continued. A television actor. A good one. But that generation was built on mystique. On not being testable. On being unavailable for proof. That's not the future of martial arts. That's a dead thing in a museum. We're the next thing. He set the microphone down. The Bel Air was not silent. Silence is the absence of sound. This was the presence of an incomplete thought. A sentence that had been spoken but not finished. The tournament director's hands moved to his lap. A woman in the 7th row set her champagne glass down without finishing her sip. A stunt coordinator in row 3 stopped writing on the small pad he always carried. The man in the 5th row stood up. He did not rush. He did not move with anger. He simply rose from his chair and placed his hands flat on the table in front of him. Then he folded his windbreaker once, laid it down beside where he had been sitting, and began to walk toward the stage. The walk took 17 seconds. He walked at the speed of a man moving through an ordinary afternoon. He passed between 2 standing lights. He did not brush either one. As he walked, recognition began to move through the crowd the way a current moves through water. Row 6 recognized him. Row 4 recognized him. Row 3 recognized him. The recognition was not loud. It moved as a kind of electric understanding that the room had reorganized itself into a before and an after. He reached the stage. He did not climb the stairs. He walked around them. He stood at a distance that was neither close nor far from Brad Lancaster. The distance was 8 feet. This distance was not accidental. A photographer later described the moment this way: the light in the ballroom did not change, but it seemed to. There was no music, but there seemed to be. There was no crowd, because everyone in the crowd had stopped being a crowd and become individual witnesses to a single sentence that was about to be spoken. Chuck Norris looked at Brad Lancaster, and his expression did not change, and he said nothing for 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, 1,247 individual thoughts moved through the room. Then he spoke, and his voice was barely above a conversational level. "You have already lost. You simply do not know it yet." He did not wait for a response. He turned and walked back toward his table at the same measured pace. The walk back took 18 seconds. 2 seconds longer than the walk forward, because this walk was a return to a seat that had become, in the interim, the most important seat in the building. If the narrative of martial arts was a war, then the opening exchange had just been won by a man who had not thrown a strike. Brad Lancaster stood on the stage. His hand was still raised. His body did not know what to do with itself now that it had been addressed and found insufficient. The tournament director stood. This was a signal. 2 security personnel moved toward the stage, but they stopped 15 feet away because the situation had become unclear. Brad Lancaster's instructor, who sat in row 2, began to move as if to leave, then stopped, then began again. The Bel Air was not the kind of place where violence was supposed to occur. The Bel Air was also not the kind of place where a man was supposed to stand and say he was finished before anything had begun. "I think," Brad Lancaster said into the dead space, "that we should settle this the way it's supposed to be settled." Chuck Norris was halfway back to his table. He stopped. He turned. He walked back to the stage. This time, his pace was different. This time, his breath was different. The air in the ballroom moved in a direction it had not moved before. He did not climb the stairs. He walked around them again. He removed his cap and placed it on the edge of the stage. The cap was white with a faded logo. He set it down as if it belonged there. Then, he stood and waited. Brad Lancaster came down off the stage. He moved with controlled energy. He had trained against good people. He had won more often than he had lost. He carried 3 months of confidence in his body. In the moment before they stood at distance, he had every reason to believe that the confident thing would happen. That confidence lasted 5 seconds. Second 1. Brad moved forward with a leading right hand, setting up a combination. It was good technique. It was the kind of move that wins tournaments. Chuck stepped backward, and the leading right hand moved past him, with 9 inches of clearance. The air displaced by Brad's hand was the only thing that touched him. Second 2. Brad continued the combination with a cross and a hook. Both were thrown from positions of good weight distribution. Both were thrown with speed. Neither connected. Chuck did not block either strike. He did not parry them. He slipped them with movements so minimal that a person in row 7 would not have been certain movement had occurred. The tournament director's both hands were now flat on the table in front of him. He had forgotten he was wearing his credentials. He had forgotten he was the authority figure. He was simply a witness. This is the fundamental misunderstanding about a fight. Two men in the same space do not make a fight. A fight is a negotiation about distance and time, and the reading of intention. Everything else is theater. What was occurring in the Bel Air was not theater. It was a lesson being taught to 247 people at once, with Brad Lancaster as the primary student. Second 3. Brad circled and threw a lead leg kick, the same kick that had impressed the audience during the exhibition. It had been good that time. It was slower now. Chuck turned his hip, and the kick moved past him with 1 foot of clearance. The sound of the kick was the sound of air being torn. The sound of the miss was louder. A woman in row 6 covered her mouth with her hand. Not because she was shocked, but because she had understood something that had previously been unclear. The man in the windbreaker was not moving to engage. He was moving to teach. The engagement was already over. This was the moment of instruction. Second 4. Brad stepped back. He reset. He understood he was being moved backward by a man who had not thrown a significant strike. The understanding produced a kind of clarity. He attacked with greater urgency. A combination of 3 strikes, each building on the last. This was the best of what he had learned. This was the technique that had won tournaments. This was the confidence that had built his reputation in the stunt community. None of it reached the target. The first strike, a jab, moved past Chuck's head as he slipped with a small rotation of his shoulders. The second strike, a cross, moved past his ribs as he rotated again in the opposite direction. The third strike, an uppercut, moved past his chin as he moved backward in 3 steps of perfect alignment. Brad had now thrown 9 significant strikes. 0 had connected. 0 had been blocked. 0 had been parried. Every single one had been read before it was complete. A stunt coordinator in row 3 set down his pen. He did not pick it up again. Whatever he had been writing had become irrelevant. Second 5. Brad was now 3 seconds into the confrontation. His heart rate was elevated. His breathing was elevated. His confidence, which had felt like an asset, was now beginning to feel like a weight he was carrying. He reset and threw again. A spinning kick. This is an advanced technique. This is a kick that, when it lands, looks like a testament to real training. When it misses, it looks like a mistake. It missed. The rotation of Brad's body moved through complete 360 degrees and landed him facing away from Chuck Norris, facing the crowd, facing the recognition that something had gone wrong with his understanding. Second 6. Brad completed his rotation and found Chuck Norris standing exactly where he had been standing before the kick. The distance had not changed. The composure had not changed. The expression had not changed. Brad had now expended significant energy. He had now thrown 11 significant strikes. He had now been defeated in a way that made every previous victory in a tournament seem like a game played against people who had agreed to lose to him. He stood. He did not charge. He did not throw. He stood and understood what was happening. Then Chuck Norris moved. It was the first true offensive action of the 6 seconds. He closed the distance with 2 steps. He turned his hip and prepared to throw a technique. His hand moved upward and forward toward Brad Lancaster's temple. Brad did not block it. Brad did not see it until it had already begun, and by the time he could see it, the movement was complete. Chuck's hand stopped 1 inch from Brad's face. Not 1 foot. Not 6 inches. 1 inch. The distance that separates a demonstration from a breaking of bones. The hand remained there for 1 full second. Brad Lancaster did not breathe. The tournament director did not breathe. The woman who had covered her mouth did not breathe. The light from the 3 overhead panels fell flat and indifferent on the polished floor. A security guard in the corner watched the door. A caterer outside the ballroom continued to arrange napkins on a table, unaware that the nature of martial arts had just been rewritten in the space of 6 seconds. Chuck lowered his hand. He looked at Brad Lancaster and he did not speak loudly, and what he said was only for Brad to hear. The 247 people in the ballroom would spend years trying to guess what the sentence was. The stunt coordinator would write it down incorrectly. The tournament director would tell a different version at a conference in San Francisco. The woman in row 6 would tell her sister, and her sister would tell her daughter that it was a threat. It was not a threat. It was something simpler than that. It was a conversation between 2 men about the nature of truth and humility, and the difference between believing you have learned something and having actually learned it. What Chuck said was this: the lineages remain. Brad Lancaster stood at the fork in the road that opens only to men who have been undeniably defeated. He could apologize. He could admit that he had walked into the ballroom carrying an arrogance based on incomplete information. He could become a man who had been humbled and had learned from it. Or he could make an excuse. He could say he had been unprepared. He could say the light was wrong. He could say that this was not real fighting, but theatrical display. He could remain the man he had been when he walked in. He chose to speak. His voice was different now. It was smaller. It was the voice of someone who had understood that his understanding had been incomplete. I was wrong, he said. I was wrong about the lineages. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about what I know. He did not ask permission to leave. He simply walked toward the exit. The crowd did not part for him. They simply could not think of him while he was in their presence. He was already leaving their minds, the way a dream leaves a mind in the morning. Chuck Norris stood for 10 seconds. The indifferent world moved on. The light continued to fall on the polished floor. The security guard continued to watch the door. Then Chuck picked up his cap and walked back to his table and folded the windbreaker and placed it on the back of his chair and sat down as if he had simply been waiting for something, and the waiting was finished. The moment he sat down, the ballroom seemed to remember that it was a ballroom. Conversation started. The tournament director moved. The photographer began taking pictures again, but the important picture had already been taken before the camera began to roll. A man placed his hand on Chuck's shoulder as he moved past. The small contact of one person confirming that another person was solid, was real, had truly been present for what had just occurred. Others followed. The hand on the shoulder became a tradition. Each person who passed wanted to verify that what they had witnessed was not a hallucination but a transfer of information from one human being to another, in a space of 6 seconds. If you want to find out what happened in the weeks and months that followed, make sure you are subscribed, and comment below where you are watching from. The story of the Bel Air did not remain in the Bel Air. Brad Lancaster's instructor began to retell it at seminars. The details shifted. In the first retelling, the confrontation lasted 10 seconds. In the third retelling, it lasted 30 seconds. In the 7th retelling, Brad had thrown 40 strikes. In the 15th retelling, people swore that Chuck's hand had actually struck Brad's face, and that Brad had simply chosen not to fall. The truth was duller and more important. The truth was that the entire confrontation had lasted 6 seconds, and that no strike had landed, and that every single second had been a complete answer to a question that Brad Lancaster had asked with his presence. Years later, in 1989, Brad Lancaster would open a small dojo in Ojai. He would focus on teaching philosophy alongside technique. He would tell the story of the Bel Air to his students, but he would begin it differently than it had begun in the ballroom. He would begin by saying, "When I was wrong, not when I fought Chuck Norris." By this time, Chuck had moved into film work extensively. They did not see each other again. But something had passed between them, and both men carried it forward. In 1994, Brad published a memoir. A small publisher. Fewer than 3,000 copies sold. In the memoir he wrote about the Bel Air, in a chapter titled The 6 Seconds, he did not paint himself as a hero. He painted himself as a man who had been wrong and who had learned it. He wrote, "The lineages remain because they are built on something television cannot reach. They are built on the body's understanding of its own limitation." A tournament is a test of your capability against someone who is trying to beat you within rules you both agree to follow. The Bel Air was not a tournament. It was a demonstration of the difference between knowing how to fight and understanding fighting. I had trained for 3 years to know how to fight. He had spent a lifetime understanding it. The difference is not one of degree. It is one of kind. The story moved through the dojos of California. It moved through tournaments and seminars in coffee shops where martial artists gathered. It moved through film sets where choreographers told it to stunt coordinators. It moved through the years in a way that oral history moves, gaining details and shedding them, becoming legend, and then becoming lesson. The woman in row 6 told her daughter, and her daughter told a film director, and the film director mentioned it in an interview about martial arts in Hollywood, and the interviewer printed the reference in a magazine that was read by 200,000 people. By 1999, the version most people knew bore only a passing resemblance to what had occurred in the Bel Air on October 14, 1977. But the core remained. A man had been wrong. And he had been shown that he was wrong, and he had chosen to accept it. Chuck Norris never spoke about the Bel Air publicly. He was asked about it in interviews, and he would decline to answer, or he would give a short response that honored Brad's choice to apologize, without diminishing Brad's actual skill. Years later, in his 70s, he was asked about it again and he said this, "I don't think about it as a victory. I think about it as a moment when the right thing moved into the space where the wrong thing had been standing." Brad Lancaster was a good martial artist. He is still a good martial artist. What he learned in 6 seconds was something a tournament cannot teach. He learned it, and he changed because of it. That's not a victory. That's redemption. This is the difference between knowing and understanding. A man can know how to throw a strike in 1,000 different ways. A man can study and train and compete and accumulate belt ranks and accolades and the respect of his peers. These things are real. These things matter. But understanding is different. Understanding is the moment when a man apprehends something about himself that changes the direction of his thinking. Understanding is not something that can be taught. It can only be met. Brad Lancaster met it in the Bel Air in 6 seconds, and he was a different man from that moment forward. He was a better man. Not because he had been beaten, because he had chosen to learn from it. Next week, we will talk about the time Chuck Norris exposed a young fighter's technique in front of an entire academy of students. The student's name was Stephen Torres, and he was known as undefeated. By the end of their encounter, he was known as something else entirely. Make sure you are subscribed.